boy. Let's
Greetings, programs, and welcome back to an episode of the Awesome Friday podcast. Join me in welcoming Simon back to the show from his month away as he tries desperately to do a North American accent. How are you, Simon?
Well, howdy, Matthew. I'm just so happy to be here right now.
You know, it's actually really interesting, as I've often thought. There's a lot of English actors who, when they do North American productions, they affect a Southern accent, and I think it might just be easier for people with a British accent to affect a Southern accent because of the more sing-songy nature and the
Maybe it is a beautiful. It is
there's
beautiful
more
accent.
extended consonants and vowels, and more dialectic similarities, if you will.
I mean, it could be that I've just watched Glass Onion, and just Daniel Craig just chewing his way through that accent is a glorious thing to behold, isn't it? It really
I mean, yeah, and also I rest my case. You know, it's the same thing.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be back. I missed doing the podcast a lot. I spent 3 weeks with my parents in England, basically exposing my children to my parents for 3 weeks, and they did exactly what all grandparents should do, which is take their side on everything and feed us to within an inch of our lives, with no like leafy greens for 3 weeks, just pure comfort food, alcohol, sweets, just the best kind of 3 weeks you could want at Christmas. It was wonderful. Yeah, I put on so much weight. It was crazy.
I'm suitably jealous, as I personally have no grandparents left.
But. Well, as I've said to you many, many times, my parents who live in the south of England would love to have you. So if you just find that cheap flight to England, which like changes in 4 different places, then you want to go and have a couple of weeks and being basically fed up like a pig at Christmas, then go for it anytime, because they would love to have you. But it was great. My kids just adored being there as well. And these are city kids, and I grew up in a small C conservative Greenbelt, Hampshire, huge house with garden, and at night there's no noise.
Basically, you grew up in it. Like anyone who's listening, I haven't been there, so I can't 100% attest to this. But my mental picture of the town that Simon grew up in is basically Sanford, Gloucestershire from Hot Fuzz.
It's not far off at all. Yeah. I mean, I've been to your beautiful hometown, and there's really not much in it apart from the massive gorge you tried to drive us over. But
I didn't drive you over a gorge. I drove you up a mountain.
You tried to shake a baby out of my wife, and you almost succeeded.
I just drove on a road. It happened to be.
Oh, that was a road. Yeah. At one point, both my city kids were they're trying to work out why it was so quiet at nighttime. Why is it so quiet? Like, where is the noise? I'm like, well, you're in the country now. You're in the country now, kids. And my son, I caught him just looking around, and he was like, there's trees. Are we in the forest? There's trees everywhere. And of course, being England, we have something you don't have in Vancouver, which is just fields of animals everywhere. Like whenever you drive on a motorway, a highway, whatever you want to call it, but beside each of these roads is like farmland, and in farmland, we don't do like the crop growing that you do here. We just animals everywhere, sheep and horses and cows, and it was kind of adorable until it got annoying. But whenever we drove anywhere, all you would hear from my kids in the back are cows, sheep, horses, like, and you have to remember this is not their normal life, and this is it. I had many questions about should I be moving back? Should I be bringing my kids back to this environment? But if you know anything about the UK politics, no, I should not. The whole country,
you should at least wait until the whole country's not on strike anymore.
Well, that's the thing. We had many plans to go and see family and friends, and it was all by train. And then because of 12 years of utter disastrous malicious management by the Tories, they just went on strike. tons of public workers went on strike, which I fully support, but it means all of our plans basically stopped. We didn't get anywhere. So
Hmm.
that was annoying to make it that far and then just be at the last hurdle. We went to London for the day, and usually from my town I grew up in was really, really boring and very, very old, full of old people until I moved out. And then lots of families discovered that it's an amazing commute town to Waterloo Station, an hour away. So it's a beautiful town now. It's really, really fun. Loads of life. Like I can't believe what it's transformed into. But this, because of the train strikes, there was no direct line to London. So I won't go through the full story, but we had the most hilarious stroke stressful trip to London because they were basically just making up trains as they went. And we were sprinting. Had to get off at stations. We sprinted between stations. I held up a train while screaming for my wife to run, and like it was proper, like end of those Hugh Grant movies like Love Actually. Basically, it was like an end of one of those movies where I'm holding up a train, yelling for my wife to get on so we can go home for Christmas.
You have an inner monologue where you say, "Whenever I think about love, I think about the arrivals platform at the train station."
And
And love's everywhere, as it turns
that's
out.
right. And because it's an English comedy, I can say fuck once, so I have to wait for that moment. But
I mean,
it was lovely.
we could do a whole episode about the PG-13 fuck in North American cinema, but
What now?
that is a different topic for a different time.
And on that topic, we've told our kids about that. So now, whenever we watch a PG-13, they're like, "When's it coming?" And then whenever anyone says it, they turn to me like, "That was it, wasn't it?" Like, yeah, that's the one. And it's one of our movies in our top 10, 11 today is has a beautiful use of that one word, and it's. I think sometimes when you're only allowed it once, the moment you use it is just a beautiful punctuation, isn't it? And
Hmm.
one of our movies uses it beautifully, and I enjoyed that very much. But no, it was lovely. England for 3 weeks was lovely. And before I forget, can I say again, thank you so much to Rachel for covering me on the podcast for 3 weeks. And I listened to all three once I came back. Actually, I listened to all three on the go, and she is just wonderful. Rachel, if you're listening, you're wonderful. You're so like verbose and so able to describe things where I don't feel I am sometimes. And thank you so much. But also, the thing that struck me is that you two are just so polite to each other at all times. You're so Canadian. I was listening, and every episode you disagree completely about something. But by disagreeing completely, you'd say, one of you would say, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. But for me, I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
babe, when I'm on this show, it's like, actually, Matt, no, you're completely like,
yeah.
no, you're wrong.
You definitely British it up
This is
in this
something
joint.
I bring to this podcast is my complete lack of politeness and filter when it comes to me talking emotionally about movies. And I loved it. It was like listening to two like old people in the park. It was lovely. So
I don't really know
uh
how I feel about being called an old
no,
person.
when I
Even
say I'm much older than you, but I
much.
mean
You are less than 10% older than me,
I
sir.
know one of my favorite parts is Rachel getting into and then out of hot water, describing you connecting with some movie because you're of that age group because you're older than shit. I was just like, oh, this is just the best. This is the best thing, and you're both so polite to each other. And when I say old, I don't mean your ages. I mean like comforting. I mean
Yeah.
you have this beautiful deep timbre to your voice. Rachel's voice is just beautiful. I would listen. Rachel, please do audiobooks because I would listen to you read anything really.
I
Um,
mean, I think
so it's
the way that I speak is part of the reason that this is a radio show. I mean, I have the face and voice for
I
radio.
know
You know what I mean?
that's a
You're not
very good
supposed to agree
reason.
with all of that so quickly.
Well,
But like,
I mean, Rachel doesn't know what I look like, so we can say officially now that I'm very handsome. Like, imagine a very handsome person. That's
let's
all you
not
really need to think about.
let's not press our luck. Um,
but
but what we will have
it
to
was
do though
lovely.
is we will have to have a show where you're both on, and such that
Oh, that would be
you
amazing.
so you can disagree with things politely and or
It's
impolitely,
very,
and
I
also so
know,
that you become a physical presence to each other
yeah,
and
but
not just a
I don't,
feeling.
I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I can't wait to finally chat with Rachel and have her on, but I don't want to do that. Like, she's a real film person. She's so intelligent and like able to analyze these things. And there's me who's like, I fell asleep in this movie, so I don't like it.
And you know what? Both of those are valid. And that's me being Canadian.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, but
anyway.
it was a real joy. So thank you again. Thank you as well for being your usual self. It was lovely.
Oh, thanks, man.
So what are we're doing our best of 2022 today, right?
Yeah, this is our first episode of 2023. And so we're going to talk
Ooh.
about our favorite films from the year 2022, which I'm enunciating for reasons. Um, and we're going to do each of our top 11. And the reason we're doing top 11 is that, as it turns out, 2022 was a really, really, really good year for movies. I don't know how you feel about this, Simon, but just based on my own like letterboxed stats, which I've been like reading and rereading over the past couple of days, um, I gave out more 5 out of 5s this year than I have in any year since I started keeping close track, and by a pretty wide margin too. Like I think the next busiest year for 5 out of 5s for me was like 2019. I think I gave out 6. This year I gave out 11. Usually I give
Yeah.
out like 3 to 5. You know, like
Wow.
so it's been a hell of a year, and I gave out 11 films, 5 out of 5, and so I basically refused to cut one of them out of my top 10. Is how this is going to go
No,
down.
I'm in exactly the same position. I'm glad you said that because it did feel like I've been very generous with my 4s and 5s this year, and I've noticed this year that I'm either 4 or 5 or I'm 1 or 2. Like there's very few movies that get a 3 from me because I either love something or I don't love something. And um, there's been in my catch up, I've watched 5 or 6 movies in the last 2 weeks just to catch up, and they've all completely changed my top 10, every single
Hmm.
one. And the quality, it's not just the quality of the filmmaking, because you can always find quality filmmaking. I just think the quality of writing this year has been through the roof. Just
Yeah.
really good writing and also creative direction. Like, really, I I've seen, like, you must be the same now. I've seen so much now, and I've also directed some stuff as well. And so I'm kind of getting to the point now where I need to see something that I haven't thought of, that I haven't seen before. I need to see that extra thing. And there's been tons of movies this year that have just blown me away, and some TV, to be fair. In just it's not just the budget. I haven't really seen the big budget movies. I haven't seen Avatar. I haven't seen Black Panther 2. There's a bunch of big. I haven't seen Black Adam. I'm sure that probably wouldn't crack my top 10. But
I've seen Black Adam, and it would not.
did the hierarchy of power change in the DC universe forever?
Nobody
Or
gives. I don't care. I
okay.
don't care.
So
Have you
it's
seen
about
it?
creative.
Have you seen a movie that stars The Rock? Because if you've
Um,
seen a movie that stars The Rock, just give him the ability to fly, and that is Black Adam.
I I am so over the Rock in movies now.
Yeah.
Like I'm completely. Which is, he seems like a very nice guy and he works very, very hard. But I don't, unlike, say, Dave Batista, right, who is different in different movies. I've just watched him in Glass Onion, and you
So I was going to
compare.
say we
You,
should talk about this in a few minutes when we get to Glass Onion, because my
okay,
I have a whole thesis about Dave Batista,
okay,
and I feel like we should
but
hold it
so
until we get there.
so to loop back to The Rock, then I just feel like The Rock is the same since his earlier movies. He did some interesting things. He did oh, what's anyway, he did some interesting character work, but I feel like since he found his action hero niche, he's pretty much exactly the same in every single film, and I'm just done with that. Like I was saying earlier, I need to see something new and different when I watch movies, and I'm very interested in all the behind the scenes information about what happened with Black Adam and his play to take over the DC film universe, which completely failed. I find all that just fascinating. So maybe he's not the star he thought he was, and
Yeah, again,
he
I have thoughts, is all I'm gonna
yeah,
say.
because he's a
Um,
franchise hopper, isn't he? He's hopped into a bunch of different franchises and done fine, but as a lead, I don't know.
mhm,
But this goes back to budget is less important to me. It's just the creativity of it. And one of the films in my top 10, 11 is clearly micro budget, but the creativity. I mean, I watched it yesterday, and the creativity and the vision is just blew me away.
mhm.
So yeah.
Well, let's dive in a little bit, but before we do, let's talk about a couple things. First, the format's going to be a little interesting because Simon has ranked his top 11 films, and I, as I have done for the past several years, have not ranked them. I've chosen my favorite one, and I just have the other 10 that I also think are the best of the year. So the way
Mhm.
we're going to do things is we're going to go through Simon's top 10, and that way, anytime that we overlap, I'll talk about that one because my favorite is not in his list. Um, so
Oh.
we'll talk about all the ones that we overlap on, and then we'll do the
Uh,
last few that I have in my list, and then we'll talk about my favorite. And but before we do that, Simon, as you know, I keep a letterbox, and I'm pretty pedantic about it. Do you actually maintain your letterbox account?
yeah.
Like, do you know how many films you watched
Yeah.
in
Well,
2022?
I mean, since March anyway. So I started Letterbox in earnest at Christmas 2021. So that's when I set up my account because I've got such a terrible memory. We came to the best of 2021, and I had to basically pull up the Wikipedia page of every movie released that year so I could remember what I'd actually seen.
Yeah,
And of
true.
course, you've been keeping Letterbox for a while, and so it seemed obvious to me
True
that.
story, actually. Your Letterboxd Pro just got renewed because I got billed for it because I bought it for you.
Oh, oh, thanks, man. So it was a year ago. It was
So,
perfect a year ago.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. That's company coffers, not your pockets, I hope. Um,
Sure, yeah.
it's probably the same thing at this point.
Hmm.
And then I did the usual thing of thinking, yeah, I'm going to keep Letterboxd. And then I didn't rank anything until March. But then from March, I thought, well, I should be doing this. So from March, I ranked everything. And so I've been I like Letterboxd a lot. Actually, I was worried it would be yet another. I'm trying not to use as many social media apps as I can, but it feels different.
Oh,
There,
that's because it is as social as you want it to be. So if you
yeah,
just want to log movies and keep track of stuff for your own interest, which is basically what I do, I have a
yeah.
few people I interact with on it, but the reason I keep a letterbox is for my own interests.
Actually, no, I did. No, sorry, I'm completely. I'm an idiot. I had my filter on of only watching 2022 movies. So I started from January. I've been ranking a lot since January, but
Hmm,
they were all before 2022. I didn't watch anything from 2022 until March.
that's
So,
seems wrong.
well, I mean, I I think I've often thought actually I should do my best of the year's movies at the end of the following year because I have no willpower or time to keep track of all the movies that come out. And a great example of this is my best movies of whichever year Space Sweepers came out. So was that
That was last year, the year
2019?
before. I can't remember which.
And anyway, so that was my best movie of that year. I love that movie. And then 2 months ago, I watched Green Knight, and uh, Green Knight is one of the most incredible pieces of filmmaking I've ever seen. And I looked
Hmm.
at the year it came out, and it was that same year. I'm like, well, that would have been my film of the year without any competition, really, because I love Space Sweepers. Like, I really love that movie, but Green Knight is a great example of something that is so singular and standout. It had to be my movie of that year. So I'm sure, like, there's quite a few movies on your list I haven't seen. There's one in particular that I think might disrupt my top 10. So I might find myself this time next year, um, uh, with a different top 10 of 2022. But I was playing catch up. So for January and February, I was playing catch up, and I also watched High School Musical 3 again. Because I we can get into High School Musical another time, but High School
Yeah.
Musical 3
I've been asking to
is
get into that movie for
responsible.
for so long.
High School Musical 3 is the best movie musical of our current generation, and it is responsible for any kind of musical resurgence you see in the cinema. But we'll
Mhm.
talk about that another time. I caught up with like Parallel Mothers, and I watched
Yeah, I guess
what?
at the beginning of the year last year, we did do a lot of like A, TV, and then
Yeah.
B, there was a couple things that we carried over from the year before.
Hmm.
And then there was a couple things like our Oscar show. So yeah, I guess it makes sense that you wouldn't have necessarily anything totally
Yeah.
new until
But
March. Yeah.
but my log for 2022 is very, very good. Like, it's really nice to see what I've watched, because there's a bunch of stuff that I'd forgotten I'd seen, and I
Well,
really.
according to your, so let's do two things. First off, according to your statistics page for
Ooh,
2022,
yes.
how many diary entries do you have?
Just for 2022?
Yeah, do you know how to get to that page?
Yeah, yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Uh, I
So I have. Well, I've got the filter on, but I don't. Oh God, is it on my profile? Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. Sorry. I've got it. Here we go. 80, 87 this year. That can't be
80
right.
87 things. Well, hang on. What's
No,
your
that can't be
username
right.
again?
Can you tell that I'm perfect at this? My username is it's just my name, isn't it? Simon Best. I don't know.
Well, you're pro, so I think I can just look at your stats. So hang on.
I don't know how to
Um,
make this. I don't know how to do this.
2022. Simon has logged 63 things in his diary in the year 20 calendar year
Oh, okay.
2022,
Excellent. There we go.
or a total of 120.4 hours.
Ooh,
And
lovely.
I'm just texting you that link so you have it.
I got
Have I have 344 entries in my diary. And in my list of things that I saw in the year from 2022, within the year 2022, I have 160.
I would say the key difference between you and I is that you are completely able to watch an entire movie without falling asleep.
I just don't have children. Yeah.
Something I'm not even sure I can use that as an excuse. You've seen my kids now; they're pretty self-sufficient.
Mm,
I think that's just me. I think I
hmm.
just like to sleep during movies.
That's fine.
And the louder the movie is, the more I sleep. One of the best sleeps I had was in New West, in those beautiful reclining seats when we went to. No, were you with me? I went
No.
to watch Godzilla, the second Godzilla, so King of the Monsters,
Yep.
which isn't. I don't like those movies at all, but
That's okay. You're allowed
that
to be
that
wrong.
that movie is so loud and brash. I just reclined and slept my way through the whole thing. It was beautiful. Um, I watched Godzilla versus Kong, or a little bit of that at some point, and turned it off because I thought it was absolutely dreadful. And this is
Yeah,
a discussion for another time.
yeah, a discussion for another time for
I
sure.
don't like those movies, but anyway.
You know who your most watched director is from this year, Simon?
Oh,
It's John Watts, because you watched all three MCU Spider-Man movies this year.
okay.
You watched
Oh, interesting.
Homecoming and Far From Home ahead of No Way Home, I would guess. And
Right.
so you watched him three times.
We did a Spider-Man catch up with my kids, and they really
Yeah.
enjoyed it, actually.
For me, my most watched director ended up being Sam Raimi, which I'm very happy about. And
Oh.
my most watched actor was Willem Dafoe, who apparently I saw 10 times last year.
Well, he is particularly great.
That's true. Your most watched actor, for the record, is Tony Revolori, who is in all three of those Spider-Man movies, and he's in the French Dispatch. So,
Oh, brilliant! I saw him in. He's in the Willow TV show as well,
oh yeah,
which which and he's really good in that. He's really really good in that. So yeah, that's an interesting show. I don't know if you've seen any yet, but
I have not. No.
yeah.
But anyway, well,
Okay,
let's so we're
so
gonna dive into our top 11 now. So we're gonna start with Simon's, and again, we're
yes.
gonna talk about the ones that I overlap with, and then we'll move into mine. So, Simon, what is your number 11 movie of 2022?
So my number 11 movie is I fought hard to keep this in my list because it deserves to be in a top 10 list. And people of our age and kind of approach won't usually have a Disney animated in, but my number 11 is Turning Red,
Hmm.
which came out in March. That was the first movie of 2022 I actually saw. And you don't need me to summarize what happens in Turning Red, do you? But the great thing about Turning Red, and the more you watch it, the more it reveals itself to you, is that it is, apart from creatively, it has so much spark that is a very similar, if not quite so chaotic, but a similar kind of loose animation approach as you find in Spider-Verse. There's lots of styles mixing together in Turning Red, but it is this, again, really well written, really well designed story of a girl going through puberty, like the initial stages of puberty, and as a father of an 8-year-old girl, this is not far off of my horizon, and the way it doesn't really hide away from that is really refreshing, and it doesn't do it in a patronizing way, and it doesn't do it in any way that's kind of uncomfortable, even for like. I was curious how my son would respond to this because there's lots of very obvious references to a girl like beginning her periods and what she would need for that, and the mood changes that come with that. And he loves it as much as my daughter did. Like I think it's so well done to appeal to not just adults and not just kids, but both together. Like it's a great family movie, and the uh, the message as well of embracing like this monster you have inside you, embracing the person you are, and not getting rid of it because that's the controlling family want you to be a certain person. And there's so many metaphors wrapped up in Turning Red. And it is obviously, I love how it's set in Canada. I think it's set in Toronto, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Toronto. And it's very, very Canadian. It just feels very, very Canadian. And it ends with this big boy band like finale that is visually beautiful, and it has a great message as well. And interestingly, with Turning Red, the first time I watched it, I didn't really like it, and it was one of those movies that there's been a couple of films like this where I've watched and then just thought about constantly. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I watched it again and it kind of clicked. And I must have seen it 3 or 4, 5 times this year because my daughter loves watching it.
Hmm.
And it's just such, it's got that, oh, help me. The Miller and, who did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs?
Oh, Lord
Uh,
and Miller, yeah.
Lord and Miller. It's got that Lord and Miller bounce. Like it's so hard. So many animated movies have tried to recapture Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Mitchell versus the Machines, Spider Verse, obviously. That kind of everything comes quickly and everything's bounced. It's got so much energy, and this is one of the few non-Lord and Miller movies that feels like it has that kind of energy, and it's just brilliant. And the making of is really fascinating as well. Just it's such a labor of love, and there's so much about this woman's life in this film as well, and that really sticks with me too. It's a great
Hmm.
film.
Yeah, I remember thinking it
So,
was fine, and it's you're definitely not alone. I've seen it in a number of other top 10 lists, including Letterboxd's top 10 of animation for the year. I think it's number 6 or 7.
oh yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely up there. But I don't
yeah,
have strong feelings about it, so let's move on.
yeah. No,
To
that's fine.
your next film is one I do have strong
Okay.
feelings about, so let's talk about that.
Okay, my top 10 film is the film that has the excellent use of fuck, which is Top Gun Maverick. which at one point Miles Teller goes, "What the fuck was that?" And it is so perfectly done. Um, so the I'm not so Top Gun Maverick is a fantastic film,
Yes.
and I haven't seen it. I haven't felt compelled to rewatch it since I saw it in the cinema. But again, I saw it with my family. My kids, we were sat behind my kids in this weird sort of stretched. It wasn't quite IMAX, but it was stretched on the side of the walls. And when Tom does the thing, when the missile goes in the thing, my kids punched the air and went woohoo! Like any movie any movie that makes my kids do that in a packed cinema is a 10 out of 10 for me, like a 5 out of 5. I haven't rewatched it, but I know it deserves to be in my list. And I watched on the plane the first 5 minutes, and I really love Tony Scott movies. And the first 5 minutes of this movie is a pure love letter to Tony Scott, and I just really love that. And
And
you, what
to
did
the
you?
original Top Gun as well. It's
Yeah,
basically a
yes.
remake of the first scene of the original Top Gun.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you tell me how you feel. I've been talking a lot. This is
So
on
I
your
mean,
list, I know.
yeah, this is on my list. Again, it's an unranked list. It's not my favorite, but my very favorite. But it's definitely one of the best films of the year for me. This is a movie that was made specifically for me, uh, um, because Top Gun. I think we talked about it when we talked about it. Top Gun is one of those films that, when I was young, it was one of the sort of adult films that I was allowed to watch, and I've watched that movie more times than anyone can possibly count. And this movie is a perfect sequel to that. A perfect, you know, what's the right word for this? If the initial one is about Maverick learning to not be a brash kid, the new one is about him trying to exist in a world where he is still brash.
Mhm.
Um, it's a movie about, and it's a movie very nakedly, and this is the thing that you'll find um, about movies that I like seems to be English good. What am I trying to say? This is a movie that's very nakedly about making movies as well, and about that human element that is required for making movies. It's an extended metaphor for the filmmaking process, and about Tom Cruise making movies the way he makes them,
Yeah,
very
and
specifically.
it's
And
his career within the movie business.
yeah,
This is like it's
exactly.
great.
Yeah, and I love every second of this movie. Um, it is perfectly structured. It is perfectly paced. The last half hour is a love letter to 80s action movies, but again, to Top Gun in particular. And it's a point of that movie where they basically be like, "Should we jump in the nostalgia machine?" And then it goes, "Yup," and then they do that. Um, so it hits all the right buttons in all the right ways, and I'm so glad that it became the big theatrical hit of the year,
Mm.
and I couldn't be happier about that. Yeah,
It really deserved to be as well. And the thing about a Top Gun sequel with Tom Cruise, it would have been the absolute easiest thing in the world to rent a green screen for a month and to shoot some flybys with your mechanical like cameras and CG it all in and have him with some hot thing, and then have him on a bike, him playing beach volleyball, him with some beautiful woman, and then uh, a final thing where he has to win. And to be fair, this is all in that movie. The movie does all those things,
yep.
but
But it
they
reconciles
really,
with them in a
really
way where it's like you're not a kid anymore. You're not 24
well.
anymore.
That's
You need to grow up and be the adult
well.
version, the best adult version of yourself, and it's just
I
so
think that's why it works so well. Like
yeah,
all the cliches are there, but it's so well written. Christopher McQuarrie took a pass at this, and he's just gold for dialogue anyway. But he's really good at stitching interesting things together when it comes to movie scenes. And every part of this movie is done with creativity and love.
yeah,
And it would have been so much cheaper to wheel it out. Everyone would have gone, and everyone would have gone, oh yeah, fine, Top Gun sequel, it's just the same as Top Gun. But it's an absolute labor of love, and they paid significantly more money to have actual planes doing actual things, and
Hmm.
it looks the shit. Like it just looks so good,
It really
and
does.
the human eye knows the difference between CG and real. And there's one very obvious bit of CG in this movie because it has to. It's like some explosion where they fly through an explosion, and it's so obvious. Your brain knows. Your brain goes, "Oh yeah, that's the CG," and it's so obvious because the rest of this movie just looks the absolute shit. And I'm really happy that Joseph Kosinski, the director, is having his day with this because I really love Tron Legacy. I think that's a great movie, and it gets dumped on a lot. But I think he's a really interesting director,
Yeah,
and
except
I
when he's
really.
not.
Oh God, yeah. What's the one he followed up? That was
Doesn't
terrible.
doesn't matter.
Anyway, we talked about that in a previous podcast. Check it out. There's
Yeah.
a movie that he did after this is not good, but I mean, this is the Tom Cruise effect, isn't it? Like he doesn't make films that are just churned out. Really, say what you want about him, but he puts love and he puts craft into things, and it's just everything. Every frame of this movie is because of that, and also I'm amazed they got Val Kilmer in, and I'm amazed they got him to do what he did. And
Hmm.
I actually thought it was going to be not in bad taste, but I thought it's just don't wheel out the horribly disabled old man now. Like, just don't wheel him out for the money. But it was so delicate and it was so sensitive, and it actually fit what was
Yeah.
happening. And there were definitely
Wonder
some wet
wonderful
eyes in the theater as well.
wonderful evolution of the relationship of those two
Yeah.
characters as well.
Yeah, again, it was just done with love and it was done really carefully. And it was lovely to see Val Kilmer again. And there were some sniffs for sure.
Yeah.
But and it just ends really well. I can't believe a film with Miles Teller, who is a personality void, ended up in my top 10, top 11 of the year. But it was lovely. Just a really lovely
Yeah.
film.
Miles Teller is one of those guys who is, I think he tends to be either really, really good or blank. And this is one of the ones where he's really, really good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's great.
so moving on though, now we're down to your number 9, which I think I need to say with a bit of a drawl.
Well,
Number 9 on your list.
oh, it's so easy. It was staring at me in the face all the time.
Yeah.
That's my audition for Benoit Blanc. Um,
That's not hold our breath. But
I put so this is Knives Out, Glass Onion, and you can talk about this one. Is this in your list? In your
uh,
top?
it is Glass Onion is in my
Okay,
list.
so why don't you talk about this one?
I adored Glass Onion. I think I like Glass Onion more than you for one,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but also more than Knives Out. That might be just the recency bias of the whole thing. I haven't
Hmm.
seen Knives Out in a while, but I adored how intricately the whole thing is put together. There's a moment towards the end that I don't want to spoil where there's a thing that keeps happening in the film that I kind of was like, what? That isn't what? And then it becomes like a plot point at the end, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe like I can't say it without it's a pretty major spoiler.
Yeah, yeah.
But it does result in one of my favorite line readings of the year where Benoit Blanc says like, "Oh, it's just so dumb," and then someone else says, "It's so dumb, it's brilliant," and he goes, "No, it's just dumb." Uh, and
I,
just like it's so wonderfully performed. It has great performances from literally everyone who's in it. But Daniel Craig is clearly having the time of his life. I do wonder if it being like post Bond has anything to do with that. But he's having such a great time. I thought that all of the casting is inspired. Janelle Monet is it's just unfair that she exists. To be perfectly honest,
I thought
to the rest of us,
she was spectacular.
yeah.
I
Uh,
honestly, I've seen, yeah.
Catherine Hahn is always a win. We were gonna not talk about Dave Bautista earlier because he is such an interesting actor, and if 10 years ago you'd given me like is it going to be The Rock or Dave Bautista or John Cena, who's going to be the best actor of the
Hmm.
three big wrestlers turned actor. I don't know how I would react to that, but he is the best actor of the three, and he's the most interesting, and he seems to be the most interesting person. He's not just being himself in every movie like The
Hmm.
Rock is, and to a lesser extent, John Cena is, but basically John Cena is. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and the mystery is good, and I know that you didn't find the resolution to be entirely satisfying, but I really did. I really liked how it
So
wrapped up, and I know
I,
that's just a genre thing
yeah,
for you,
we,
but
it
I really
is.
enjoyed the whole
We
thing.
can't really talk about it, but suffice it to say that I adored 95% of this movie. Like adored it. It's such a treat. Like what I watched the Menu and Glass Onion within a day of each other, and they are both just an absolute pleasure of filmmaking brilliance to watch. And the Ryan Johnson's a fantastic writer, fantastic director, and just as an ensemble director, he is incredible. I didn't like the denouement at the very, very end. In fact, it didn't make my top 10 yesterday. And then I was putting it together to record today. And I haven't stopped thinking about that movie since I saw it. And again, it's one of those things like you may have an opinion, but a day later, if it's still in your head, I was like, no, that's got to be in my top 10. It's
Yeah,
my gut feeling is it has to be in there. The cast, as you said, is amazing. I want to point out someone you haven't, which is Jessica Henwick, who I think is one of the most interesting actors working, not just British actors, but in anything at the moment. I think she's incredible, and she's great in this too. Kate Hudson like needs to do more stuff. I hope this is a jump off point for Kate Hudson to do a lot more stuff because she's fantastic too. I mean, everyone's great. There isn't anyone bad in this film because everyone is written so beautifully. Everyone has so much character to deal with. So it's not just Catherine Hahn who gets like, and she's brilliant no matter what she gets. But you've got someone like Madeline Klein who is playing a character that could have been easily just left as this superficial eye
oh
candy,
yeah,
which but she is written with she's got so much lovely writing and she does such a great job with the different sides of that character too. And yeah, Janelle Moray, am I saying her name right?
Janelle Monet, as far as I know.
Is like I've never seen her this good before in anything. She is brilliant in this, and the
Yeah,
range, without saying too much, her range is amazing. So,
I
and of
think it
course,
really
Daniel
touched.
Craig's great.
I think it really touched on it there with that, and I think it's a sign. I think Ryan Johnson does this in basically all of the films he's written, but he manages to make it so that when, however big the ensemble is, literally every character feels like a real person. There's very few that are like, even the characters that are one dimensional in the story are not one dimensional. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like
Hmm.
the narcissistic billionaire in Glass Onion, who could have very easily have been
Hmm.
a totally single note character, isn't. And like the hot
Hmm.
girlfriend in this, who again you've
Hmm.
already mentioned, um, could very easily have been a single note character, but isn't. And everyone feels well rounded, no matter
Yeah,
how much or little dialogue they have. And I think
yeah,
that's
totally.
a skill that many other writers either. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
sure they have it somewhere, but it's not a thing that happens this well in um, uh, ensembles as it has in this one and in Knives Out,
Yeah, totally.
and
I,
the Last Jedi, and Looper, and Brick,
I mean,
and like everything he's done.
there is a certain malicious satisfaction I get to see Ryan Johnson surviving and being amazing after the Last Jedi shit that he got with by making like
God,
he could just carry on making Knives Out forever now. He is so good at directing, and this is just it's such a beautiful fuck you, isn't it?
hmm
To be what's they say the best revenge is success. Like he is just so good at doing this, and he was so good at doing it in Star Wars as well. And we didn't like Star Wars fans didn't deserve that clearly. So
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely to see him being so good.
Yeah, it's a shame because I really would have liked to see him do more Star Wars, but
Yeah,
I'm glad he's not. I
sure.
I do actually legitimately hope that him and Daniel Craig make these movies together, like
He
every
still needs
five
to be
years,
making.
like every
Yeah.
5 years for the rest of time. That would be fine by me.
You're totally right about Daniel Craig like having an absolute ball. It's almost pantomime dame levels of fun he's having here. Not the level of acting he's doing, but he is just having a great time, and he fits into this character so well. He doesn't look awkward. If you think about the jump between like Bond and Blanc in terms of uh, affectations and accents, but also like what he wears as well. Daniel Craig's a great actor, and he is able to jump from these two very very different characters, and he's just having a great time, and he's clearly having a great time. And we know that he really hated making Bond movies as well, not because he hates Bond, but just because of the machine.
Hmm.
And you can see him just loving this, and I'm sure everyone who talks about Ryan Johnson talks about how what a great actor's director he is, and so I'm sure they just had the best time in Greece making this film.
Yeah,
It's
I
great.
could keep talking, but we should move on because we're already
Okay,
running
so
long.
oh, wonderful. Okay, next one. Oh my
Uh,
god, we're only at 8.
yep.
Okay, 8 is the absolute joyous work of art that is Ambulance, capital L, capital A. Did this get in your top 10?
No, it's in my best of the rest though. It's in my honorable
Okay.
mentions.
Um, I I think, like Roland Emmerich, I think when Michael Mann is allowed just to go and do what he wants to do and do it well, this is a perfect example of that. And
Do you mean
he only made
Mike? It's not Michael Mann though.
sorry, not Michael Mann. I don't even like Michael Mann. Oh, Michael Bay. Sorry,
uh,
I got confused. Can you imagine Michael Mann making a Michael Bay movie? It would be terrible.
it would be
Um,
wonderfully terrible, probably. It'd be very intense.
do you know what I love about Ambulance is that it absolutely doesn't waste any time at all. Like there's the build up is like 5 minutes of him going to see his friend, and then Gyllenhaal's like, "Well, we're going to go do this thing," and then it goes shit shaped, and it's just like it's a fairground ride of
Yeah.
drones speeding around cars, with all the angles are like 45 degrees from the feet up, and it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. I love this film. I watched it on the way to the UK, and I had to fight not to watch it again on the way home because I'm gonna buy that thing on 4K and I'm gonna watch the hell out of that movie again soon.
Well, I mean, the other thing it really has going for it, I think, is that Michael Bay, I think, is at his best when he has actors who are on his specific wavelength, and Gyllenhaal is on his wavelength in
Yes,
Ambulance.
oh, it's so good.
He's balls to the wall, like dialed to
Oh
11 in every scene, but it is so in keeping with the tone of the movie that it just works.
yeah,
And
I've
like
got such a yeah.
it makes everyone else in the movie feel restrained, even though they are also like cranking it at least to 10. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's a kind of a wonderful performance. It's as many Michael Bay movies, it's a little bit on the long side, but like
love it. I don't.
it's exhausting, but in the good way would be the way I
Yeah.
would put
Oh,
it.
it's just like the best kind of eye popcorn. It really is. And you're right. I've met Gyllenhaal. I've got a total man crush on him. I'm not gay, but like he is my. I'm not. I'm straight, but um, he is for the same reasons I loved him in Spider-Man Far From Home as well. He's just completely on board, chewing the scenery. Is he nice or is he nasty or is he both? Like he is having a great time too, and it's a great film. It's just a great action movie,
Hmm.
brilliantly shot as well.
Nice.
Okay, number seven
So
is on your list. So why don't you tell me about number seven?
number 7 is Martin McDonagh's return to I don't know what the right word for this is 'cause I haven't liked his last couple of films, but it's Martin McDonagh's latest, The Banshees of Inisherin. His new collaboration is with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, which is darkly comedic and emotionally devastating,
Oh, it
and
is.
easily, easily like one of the best acting movies of the year. I when we get to like there's a point at which I want to say a couple things later on, but like spoiler alert, I think 2022 is Colin Farrell's year. I think that's not up for
Totally.
debate. Like whether you're thinking about just this movie or the fact that he was also in the Batman and After Yang and 13
Yeah.
Lives. I don't think anyone's had a year like that
No.
in recent memory.
No. The
And even
range
and,
and the
and even and
quality
even
is
13
really good.
Lives, which is it's basically a fine movie. It's also Ron Howard's best movie in like a decade,
Hmm.
at least. Um, but like, there's so much range there and so much buy-in to each of the performances. But in this one in
Hmm.
particular, where he plays kind of this kind of happy-go-lucky idiot who is
He's
it's
dull. He's dull.
he's a bit of a dullard,
He's a
and
bit of a dullard.
the whole setup of this movie being Brendan Gleeson doesn't want to be his friend anymore, and it being basically a microcosm of the Irish Civil War. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
just wonderful, and it also
Well, who?
has, I think, it's annoying to say, but I think it's not annoying. It's that there's so many good uh, actress performances this year, but I genuinely hope that Carrie
Oh my
Condon
god.
wins Best Supporting Actress for this role. If this movie wins any acting
Amazing.
awards, I kind of hope it's Carrie Condon because she is
Hmm.
so wonderful, and she has one of my other favorite line reads in the whole movie, where at one point she's confronting Brendan Gleeson and like, "Why don't you like my brother anymore?" And Brendan Gleeson says, "Well, he's boring," and she's like, "You're all boring. All of you men on this island are boring." And it's just such a wonderful scene of like the
Hmm.
only competent person on the island basically showing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I adored this movie as well.
I mean, who'd have thought you could make a 2 hour movie out of what if someone stopped liking you? And it not only does it work, but it's a devastating movie, but not
Hmm.
one that like there are other devastating movies that feel traumatic to watch, but I don't think enough is really talked about. Well, we talk about grief and loss in terms of death, right? But when friendships end, that's a real like traumatic moment if a friendship ends that we don't really talk about in the same breath as other kinds of trauma. And this film really underlines that. And the problem, the good problem, is that Colin Farrell so brilliantly portrays his character. He is dull. He is a bit simple, but he's like a child. It's like watching a child learn that they don't have friends anymore, and it's and his only friend is a donkey, and then uh, it's 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 devastating. But also, there's a one of the key points of this is how niceness is not valued, and I think that hits home as well. But also, what happens when innocence is lost? What happens when you decide not to be nice anymore? And the absolute devastation of losing, of breaking this childlike innocence to try and get some kind of revenge. And
And I'm
they're
sure,
both so brilliant at
yeah,
that edge of I hate you but I love you,
I
and it's
do.
just
I do also like we talk about Colin Farrell, but Brendan Gleeson is also just wonderful,
oh my god, yeah, it's
and
great.
like he manages to make his character so basically like sympathetic while also being a
Mm,
complete asshole, like
yeah, and that's the
and an
yeah,
arrogant
totally.
piece of shit. Like, I'm not
So
going to be your friend anymore because I'm going to go create great art. And like,
yeah,
are you though? Like, are you though? Fiddle player from
yeah,
Tiny Island? Like, no. Like,
it's so brilliantly written and acted to really convey that at the end. It really puts a spotlight on him being the asshole, being the one in the wrong, and it's just so brilliantly done. And it really pushes it as well. In the last third, it goes to places you necessarily might not have predicted, but it still fits. And there's lots of metaphor in there, like you mentioned, the civil war happening just over the water, and you only ever hear gunshots, and it kind of echoes the what's going on between them as well. But there's lots of metaphors about death and entropy and just trying to escape the ruts that you get into. It works on so many different levels, and visually it's Ireland, so
Yeah.
it's just this gorgeous set of islands they filmed on off the mainland, and it's so good to look at. And who's the guy who's now the Joker in the Batman? Barry Keoghan. He's in Green Knight as well.
Barry Keegan. Yeah,
Barry Keoghan.
he's also wonderful.
He
He deserves all the nominations for best supporting
brilliant.
actor.
And when you first see him, he's kind of a bit of a gobshite, and what he does with that character, and of course how it's written as well, but he finds a really delicate balance in that as well. It's just a brilliant, devastating film. Like, it's concept film, character film. It's really great. Really, really great.
Yeah. All right. We're
Okay,
not moving fast enough. So
okay. Oh my god, I've got so much to say. It's okay. We can go a little bit late. It's our summary. Number 6 is Decision to Leave. I think I like this more than you did.
yes.
For me, this was. I love Hitchcock, and felt like a modern Hitchcock to me. The thing about this was the creativity and the framing and the editing and the cross editing and the way the mystery is sort of unraveled towards the end, and then you have an ending that is I can't even talk about the ending without giving it away, but it is shocking and
Also devastating.
also devastating, but also it's another movie that looks at obsession and love and trust and the acting, especially I don't know the woman in this. I'm sorry.
Tang Wei, I believe is her name.
Right, sure. Sorry, I didn't prep the cast. Yeah, Tang Wei. It's so measured, and Hayo Park is great as well. But she is so measured and so layered. It's very, very Hitchcockian performance as well. It's really stuck with me. Again, it's a film that I've thought about a lot since I saw it, and just brilliantly filmed and directed and edited. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I think for me, if in terms of like film out of that region, it would probably be my number 2 of the year. But it's not even on my um, best of the rest. Like, I think it's great. It didn't really, I didn't connect with it in the same way that you did.
Yeah, no, it really worked for me for sure. Okay, there's 5. Let's go to 5 because this 5. I thought 5 might actually become my 1 or 2 at one point. What's number 5? You talked about 5 recently. It's because you and Rachel talked about number 5 that I watched it,
It's
and
true.
it's the last film I watched before putting together my top 11, and I'm so glad I did. Why don't you tell me?
Yeah,
Why don't you remind us what it is?
you're talking about the wonderful Canadian indie film called Polaris,
Mm-hmm.
which features a young actress named Viva Lee.
Oh my god.
And it's set in a dystopian future where everything is frozen. There's basically no dialogue other than a made up language. And it is about a young girl who's been raised by a polar bear who gets separated from said polar bear and then spends the rest of the movie trying to reconnect.
Yep.
And there's like
And survive. Yeah.
Mad Max esque bad guys on snowmobiles, and tons and tons of creativity in terms of like the way the world is set up and the way it looks and the way were able to achieve many of the effects and set pieces and acting and everything. I think it's not on my top 10. It is in my best of the rest, and I think it's actually my top Canadian film of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's out of the Canadian films I've seen this year. It's easily the best Canadian film I've seen this year. I think what worked. Like, Polaris is absolutely my kind of movie because it's dialogue free or dialogue you can understand. So it's almost like it reminded me in how weird it is as well of some of these Japanese animation movies that take big swings and assume that you are going to keep up
Mm-hmm.
in terms of it doesn't over explain anything. In fact, the only thing I disliked about this movie is the title card at the beginning that already tells you too much. Like, I could have done away with that. You don't need that at all to understand what's going on.
Hmm.
And um, there's so many big swings in this movie, and I'm pretty sure the budget was minuscule compared to the other things on my list. And there's so much creativity in this film, and it doesn't hold back from being uh, quite a weird metaphor. Like, when at the end of this film, you need to decide what it was about, because it's it could be about so many different things. There's so many creation myths here. There's so many examinations of this post-apocalyptic society that's forming, plus the remnants perhaps of an older world that was discovered, or an extraterrestrial
Hmm.
influence. But it doesn't matter. Like, you are not given the answers. You're not going to know who some people were, why they were there, or really what happens at the end. I mean, you have to decide what you think happens at the end. But this, I can't talk about Viva Leaves' performance with enough superlatives. Like, I believe she was 11 when she made this film, right?
That
And
sounds right. Yeah.
she just, I've worked with a lot of young actors. One of my jobs in the UK was training actors for the screen at this age. And the big thing about this age is f- maintained focus and like being in that moment. And there are so many opportunities in this moment where it would have fallen apart if it wasn't for her being in that moment. And she is just, I can't believe how young she is. I can't believe how talented she is, because she's been raised by this bear, so she's very bear like in her reactions, but it's not done. I know I can't. We haven't got time to talk about all these movies as much as I want to, but she doesn't make it like a stereotypical. Oh, now I'm going to act like a bear. She's got so many tiny little bits of body language that are so intelligent for knowing where she came from and how she interacts with other people, but also how she fights with other people. Like, her intensity when she fights is just incredible. And there's also a very soft musical element and a soft emotional element. And when she opens her mouth and shouts this like guttural when she's calling for her mama bear, and honestly, I can't I can't find the superlatives for this film, because I love, anyway, things like, it reminded me of Horizon Zero Dawn, the video game. Like, when the world has broken down and the future world has taken steps back in technology, and they're kind of rooting through the remnants of the old world, not really knowing what it was, but it's there. I love that as a genre. I love that kind of approach, and this was very much that. I love the designs. I love how brutal this film is, without any indication it's about to be brutal.
Hmm.
I just love it, and considering it was probably made on nothing, it's incredible, metaphysical, big swing sci-fi movie on Pocket Change. So, yeah, I quite like this film.
Yeah. It's not. It's
it's
not.
pretty.
It's not
It's
apparent.
pretty good. It's pretty good. So thank you to you and Rachel again, for pointing me towards it and making sure I could see it, because holy shit, what a film.
Yeah. It is really good.
Okay.
And I'm not going to talk about it because I spent a whole podcast talking about it last week.
Yes, you did. Go watch this movie. Number 4. You please talk about number 4.
What is number four? Number four is one that was actually a very strong contender to be my favorite film of the year, and that
Mm-hmm.
is the wonderful The Menu, starring
Oh my god.
starring Ray Fiennes and Anya Taylor Joy and Nicholas Hoult and a host of other amazing actors. And from it's not his debut, but like I hope that it's his big break in terms of film. The director Mark Mylod, I believe is how you say his name. Um,
What's he? What's
so
he done?
he's directed a ton of like Game of Thrones and Succession and like lots of really good TV.
Oh, right.
And
That makes sense.
this movie navigates. This might be a little controversial, but I think that this movie navigates There's a recurring theme this year of like class differences and class clashes, and I think that this movie
Mm.
manages to approach that from both the most direct and the most subtle angles at the same time. And I think it's as someone I've never worked in the restaurant industry, but as someone who spent almost his entire life in customer service industries, like this movie spoke to me on a very deep and personal level.
Yes.
And I loved literally every frame of it.
Mhm.
I don't want to talk about my favorite sequence because it is basically the ending.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but I know you weren't necessarily on board with Anya Taylor Joy as a talent, but she is.
Oh, I
Career. I don't think career
oh,
best, but like she's so good in this,
she's
and
fantastic
she's
in
another one.
this.
Like Colin Farrell is easily the performer of the year, but between this and the
Mhm.
Northman, I think she's also had a
Mm.
spectacular
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
and I just it's so well. It's like the perfect intersection of like class warfare and food, and
And also
I just it was
assholes assholes who overanalyze art.
yeah, and like
I'm watching
honestly,
this.
I mentioned this before, but like here's another movie that is an extended metaphor about making movies, and
Mhm.
I loved every frame of it. In terms of like analyzing art and like criticizing art and making art, and in particular approaching art
Mhm.
from a place of, I guess the best way to frame this, I'm going to put this poorly, I think, but because it kind of, I feel a little called out by Nicholas Holt's
Yeah,
character.
yeah, totally. Me too.
Um, and that's definitely purposeful because we review movies on this
Yeah,
podcast,
yeah.
and he is the foodie character. And I would argue that like
Oh,
we have a little more humility than that. Like I think we at least know.
I think so. I hope so.
I think we at least. I hope we at least know that we are not on par with these other filmmakers. But the scene where he gets his comeuppance is
Oh my
absolutely devastating.
god. But it's
Um,
so great because by that point you want to physically punch him in the face anyway. So it's
Yeah, and
kind of
there's a reveal about his character that comes late in the film too, where you're just like, what?
mhm.
And but it also
Yeah.
again another one of my
Oh
favorite line
man.
reads of the year, and I can't remember the exact line now. I had it written down and I can't find it, but
I
he's being
mean, he had
forced.
so many.
He no, so Ray Fiennes. One of the best
Oh.
line reads in the whole movie is from Ray Fiennes, where he's basically forcing Nicholas Hoult to cook some food, and he says something along the lines of like, "Oh yes, he's demonstrating a new method of dicing leeks that we have heretofore been ignorant of," and it's just like it's so perfect, and I just Ray
Ray
Fiennes
Fiennes is amazing.
is one of the greatest working actors out there, and he
Oh
is
yeah, yeah.
so committed to this part and clearly having the best time making it too,
And
and
he's so like I talked about the ending of a movie like this is everything, and I've talked about how the ending of Glass Onion I was a bit disappointed with. I was watching the menu thinking, please end well,
mhm,
because and the end of the menu was just one just it's a movie about food, and the ending of the menu is so deliciously great, and Ralph Fiennes adds a little thing to his character, and so does Anya Taylor-Joy, in a final move that makes total sense. And it is just the last 20 minutes is just perfect
yeah.
in a perfect film. And so yeah, it's a brilliant ending and a brilliant film.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
no, go on.
Okay, no, I was going to say I could talk more about how brilliant it is. I really liked how it wasn't what I thought it was going to be from the trailer. It actually didn't do what I thought it was going to do.
Yeah,
And
I think
again,
that's a pretty
I
common
like this. Yeah,
pretty common
I like
refrain that it like the trailers make you think it's going to be
Solid Green, right?
well the trailers make you think that it's going to be like class warfare via a specific thing, and it is class
Yeah.
warfare but via a very different thing, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like
And
that
it's
about
better. What it actually is better than what I thought it would be. And I think you're right. I think that is a deliberate move by the trailer. It's streaming on Disney Plus now. And I kind of wish I don't miss the cinema that much, but I kind of wish I'd seen the menu in a big room of people because it goes places, and
True story. When I saw
it,
the menu, it
it's
was
great.
me and three other people, and
Oh, okay,
I
maybe not.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I saw it at like a
Okay.
matinee on a Thursday, so yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. let's talk about number 3. My number
Uh,
3,
your number 3,
which
also another one that was my number one for a fair chunk of the year.
yeah, me too.
For a long chunk of the year, I was convinced that this would be my number one of the whole year, and it's kind of shocking to me even now that it isn't. To be honest,
Do you know what? I have bought this movie on 4K. I haven't seen it since the cinema. I've not felt compelled to rewatch it, and that I find interesting. I don't know why that is. It's a lot of movie. I wonder if that is like it's a lot of film. It's everywhere. It's what is it? Everything, everywhere, all at once.
yeah,
Um, a brilliant multiverse film. A brilliant film about accepting the small things as being beautiful, accepting your small life as being a beautiful life. And that really got to me. Actually, the main message of this film was like I just want to watch you do the washing up. Like I just want to do the taxes with you. Like sometimes as someone who every day is the same family life with responsibilities, and I used to have a lot of involvement in the creative arts. I used to do a lot of acting, a lot of singing, songwriting, and I don't do any of it anymore because I don't have the time or the willpower to do it. And sometimes that really gets to me. And this movie really spoke to me about it's okay to just like doing the vacuuming or just making a cup of tea for someone you love, and that really really touched me. And then buried in that is this incredible visionary multiverse movie that is incredibly creative as well. And the two Daniels last film, I actually saw, oh, Daniel Craig farting. What was it called? Um,
uh, Swiss Army Man.
Swiss Army Man. If you ever want to be knocked out with how the hell they can make a movie out of a concept, watch Swiss Army Man, which is a brilliant, brilliant film. I watched it pretty close before I saw everything everywhere, and their style is just singular. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can't
What's
wait.
your
Can't wait to see
what
what
about
they do
you?
next.
What's your feeling about this? Like a couple of months on now.
I mean, again, it's easily one of the best and most creative films of the entire year. Um, I think that Michelle Yeoh deserves to win every Best Actress uh,
Hmm.
award there is. I said before that I think Carrie Condon is probably my favorite supporting actress performance, but it's I honestly Stephanie Sue is
Oh my
also up
god,
there as the daughter as Jobu Tupaki. Um,
brilliant,
the
so good.
she's so good. I don't know if you ever watched The Marvelous Miss Maisel, but she's also wonderful in
Oh no, I haven't. No.
that. And I hope that this leads to huge things for her specifically. It's also,
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
it's not a coincidence that Ki Hui Kwan is I think I'm saying his name right. I don't think it's a coincidence that he's picking up Best Supporting Actor awards left, right, and center.
Hmm.
He's so wonderful.
Yeah,
Um, as every version of the character he has to play, and
yeah, yeah.
he's so bought in that I honestly can't see Best Supporting Actor going to anyone else at all the big awards,
Hmm.
even though Barry
Hmm.
Keoghan will probably give him a run for his money.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and yeah, I mean, yeah, that's just it. It's one of the most
yeah.
creative, visually stunning films of the year, and I also hope that the Daniels, whatever they do next, um, they keep doing whatever they have been doing, and don't let like someone give them a bazillion dollars to do something
Mm-hmm.
over the top. I think they have nailed their tone and scope, and they should
Hmm.
work within it. Hopefully,
Yeah, agree totally
yeah.
with everything you said. Good. Now my number two is not in any of your lists at all, and again, this film is made for me. This was the Bowie documentary Moon Age Daydream, and we did a whole podcast about this, so we don't need to go into it again. But uh, uh, I I am deeply moved by music, and I'm deeply moved by visuals, and this is a fantastic exploration of Bowie, but told in the most amazing visual way with no narrator. And I thought as a documentary, it just blew me away. Um, I am absolutely gutted we don't live in LA. LA, because the director Brett someone, sorry Brett, I know you're listening. Hang on, I'll go to where you liked my tweet. Brett Morgan is hosting an IMAX 12.1 showing of this with a Q&A afterwards, and god damn it, do I want to be there for all of that.
That would
It's
like I,
brilliant.
I didn't like this movie as much as you did, but that would be something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
This movie is what you might call an assault on the senses and
Yes,
emotions.
yes, yes, and it's incredible film. Go, make sure you watch it, even if you're remotely interested, or even not remotely interested in Bowie, just in music in general. It's just a brilliant exploration of his life and his influence. And you made some really excellent points about what it doesn't say, and I've been thinking about that a lot. But it's really an excellent documentary.
Yeah. And now
Okay,
we're down to
so
your number one
number
of the
one.
entire year. Well, tell us what it is,
Um,
Simon.
my number one is another native First Nations woman fighting against a colonial metaphor, except this time, instead of Mad Max people and her polar bear, it is a literal predator. This is Prey. My number one movie of 2022 is Dan Trachtenberg's Prey, which is so stylish and so perfect and so uh, who could have predicted that the Predator franchise, which has been run into the ground, would be completely reinvigorated by doing a prequel where a Native American hunter has to prove herself in her community? And I've watched this movie a number of times now, and each time, every frame of this film fills me with joy. I love Predator as a franchise anyway. I Predator and Aliens were the movies that really inspired me when I was very, very young. I probably watched it too young, but I think Prey is better than any of the Predators, and including the original. I just think it's so brilliantly singular whilst also being part of that franchise recognizably, and it's so funny and it's so dramatic, and the ending just makes you want to stand up and scream. And I adore this film, and I really, really hope it gets a 4K physical release, because or even it didn't even get a cinema run. Like, it seems
Yeah, it went
crazy to think,
straight to
oh,
Hulu and Disney Plus here in
oh
Canada.
man, I just hope it gets a cinema run, that there's a print somewhere that they can show and gets a 4K release, because it's just glorious. It's amazing.
Uh, yeah, I
Anything
mean,
to add to that?
no, I mean this is another one that I agree with you. It's not my favorite. It is on my list, but it's not my favorite. It does have one of my favorite scenes in the whole year, and that's the scene where Naru attacks the French hunting camp, um,
Hmm.
and like in what is shot to look like a one take, but clearly probably isn't. Um,
Hmm.
but she takes down several Frenchmen all in one go, and it's just such a wonderful scene, such a wonderfully
Yeah,
executed version of that kind of scene. And
yeah,
um,
definitely.
it's kind of a shame that it did get mired in a little bit of controversy right after it came out, but I would have loved to have seen this on the big screen. It's a legitimate
Hmm.
shame that it did go straight to Disney Plus. I think even a
Hmm.
short theatrical run before it hit there would have been
Yeah.
great.
And Amber Mid Thunder is incredible in this film as well. I'm so happy that she's in my map now. I really look forward to checking out her other stuff and whatever she makes next.
Yeah, yeah, she's wonderful. She was also wonderful in Legion, which is the main thing I'd seen her in before,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I hope that she moves on to bigger and better things because she's really great.
My
Yeah, so
favorite bit
that
of this movie, before we move on, sorry, there's one bit where the predator cuts a man's head off, but the thing he uses to cut the man's head off goes clean through a tree as well. The tree falls over, and there's a shot with the predator looking almost direct to camera, looking at the stump, and the predator clearly goes, huh, and then moves on. That's my favorite bit of the whole movie.
Nice.
Okay, so let's go.
So
What else is on your list?
So yeah, so we're going through your top 11. So we're going to move on to the my. I have five more to add, but before we do, I just want to say as an honorable mention, it's not on your best of list, and it's on my
Mhm.
honorable mention list, my best of the rest. But it doesn't really matter what we say here because the film of 2022 is clearly RRR.
Yes.
Like there is no other film that captured the zeitgeist of the year, at least among
Mhm.
film nerds, the same way that RRR
Yeah,
did.
totally.
You can make there's a case to be made for RRR as the best musical, as the best rom com, as the best action
Mhm.
movie, as the best drama, uh, as the best colonial fight back movie of the like. It's the best of everything it's trying to be. Um, it has the best dance scene. It has the most passionately sung song. It has everything. It has all the things, and the whole thing is dialed to 11, and there is
Mhm.
no sarcasm or irony involved. It is
Mhm.
perfectly sincere, and I do still to this day adore this movie. And
Mhm.
I may have watched both the Natu Natu dance scene and the Cholet number from the end credits about a bazillion times on YouTube, even though I don't understand a word they're saying.
It's so funny. Go back and listen to our podcast where I go in real time, change from grading this as a 2 out of 5 to a 5 out of 5, and I really enjoy listening back to that because just by talking about it, it clicks, and then I'm like, oh my god, you're right. Like, and then I rewatched it, and it's it is so much movie,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's so hard to sort of compare it to what we feel like western movies are, because it ignores so many things that we view as quality in western movies, and it does its own thing, and it is just glorious because of that. It's
yeah.
fantastic.
And for me personally, it really, this was the year where I was like, I've been pretty good about seeking out Canadian cinema and other forms of Southeast Asian and European
Hmm.
cinemas, but I really had not bought into Indian cinema before, and I've been making an effort to do so. And honestly, it's been great.
Hmm.
It's been really great, and I'm really
Yeah.
glad that I'm doing it. So
So the my film, what's it called? New Year's. My film resolution of this year is 4K. Sorry, my film resolution this year is to have a best a best of list at the end of the year that isn't just Western movies. I want to watch a lot more Indo-Asian, a lot more Asian, a lot more European, Latino, Spanish language. I just feel like there's so many movies I don't see because they're outside of my language, and I want to rectify that this year.
yeah, it's a good thing to do. I think. I mean, I've only
Hmm.
got one non-English film on my list this year, and that's kind of a shame.
What's
Um,
that? Oh yeah, I thought about putting that on my list. Why don't you talk about that? Because they're not really in order, are
no, not really. The next one I'm going to talk about is the film that 1917 should have been, which is the
they?
new adaptation from Netflix of All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a new adaptation of a very famous story. Um, we did a whole podcast episode about it, but it is
Mm,
basically the story of a young man going to war in World War One and how that war affects him and his friends, how it dehumanizes the young men we send to war, how it,
mm,
uh, even among the people that survive the war, they come out maybe ruined is maybe too strong, but not really too strong of a word to describe what we do to young men we send to war. And this movie
mhm,
um, really drives that point home really expertly. Um,
mhm,
there's no there. It does actually have one of my favorite sequences of the whole year in it as well, and that's the opening sequence, which follows an infantry charge, followed by the collection of the bodies and the stripping of the uniforms and the repair of the uniforms, and then those uniforms being
mm,
handed back to a bunch of new recruits. I find that opening 10 minutes
mm.
devastating.
Well, the whole
uh,
film, it sets a
and
tone, doesn't it?
yeah, it sets the tone, and the whole film is devastating, but that sequence in particular really hammers home
Yeah.
that like it's just a meat grinder. It's a meat grinder for politics, and I I wish that more war movies were this pointed in their
Yeah.
anti-war messaging. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many war movies, so many movies with soldiers that are like, "Hoorah, we're the best, we're the heroes," and this
Yeah.
movie is very much about like, actually, we're just grinding these men into a pulp. And
It's a
even
hard watch. Yeah.
it's a difficult watch, but I think it's an important one. And
Yeah. Oh, sure, sure, sure.
I think that it's an important point that we show war in a realistic way, um, not just physically but psychologically. Because there's plenty of movies that get the physics of war correct, right? Like Saving
Mhm,
Private Ryan's a great example of a movie that gets like the physical act of war correct.
mhm,
But
mhm.
this is a movie that gets the psychology of war correct
Yeah.
on multiple levels, and I very much enjoyed it. I think about this movie off and on since we watched it.
Yeah. You're just so desperate. There's so much desperation from all aspects, not just from the people on the front, but the people behind the scenes trying to make it stop. Like Daniel, help me, Cruel.
Oh
What's his
yeah,
name?
Brule, I believe is his name,
Daniel Bruhl. Sorry, yeah, Bruhl. Daniel Bruhl is. I mean, he's a fantastic actor anyway, but he his character in this is really interesting and again devastating, and like he's trying to find a way to end it, and he's just the
and he's
desperation of the death around him
yeah. But meanwhile,
is
there's all these generals who are like, "We need to win this war," and
yeah,
he's like, "Our men are dying. Our men are
yeah,
dying. Why don't you care?"
yeah.
And yeah, it's another sort of devastating film, really.
It's a brilliantly made. I didn't put it on my list because I think there's the films are on my list. I loved with a warmth, and this is not a film you can love with warmth. It is a devastating, brutal film that really everyone should watch because it is a brilliant film. Brilliant, brilliant film.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, let's do
Uh,
another one.
moving on. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order until we get to my
Okay.
favorite, and that'll keep it a little fresh for you too. Um, the next film on my list is a horror film, and by far my favorite horror film of the year, and that is the 20th Century Fox, or just 20th Century released film Barbarian, which is about a young woman who travels to a place. She books an Airbnb, and things go horribly wrong from that point. And my advice, if you're going to watch this movie, is to seek out exactly none of the marketing because it goes to places you know it's going to go bad. But going into this movie as blind as possible would be a
Mhm.
boon because it does not go to the places you think it's going to go. And every single twist and turn is fresh and interesting. And we talked a lot when we watched and talked about Triangle of Sadness. But I really liked that movie, but it would have been better if it had kept me guessing all the way to the end. And Barbarian is the
Mhm.
movie this year that kept me guessing all the way to the end. So there's no way it wouldn't make my top 10. It's the only one where even like by the time the last frames run and it cuts to black, I was like, oh, that was great. I didn't expect any of that.
Mhm.
I think there's exactly one scene where I'm like, where they're clearly setting up a thing to happen and then it happens.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
so
yeah.
brief, but it doesn't, by that point, it doesn't matter because they've already done so many other things that, yeah, it's just it's not scary exactly is the wrong word, but it's the most surprising movie of the year for me, if that makes sense.
It depends how you classify scaring. There's one terrifying scene
Oh,
that.
and it also, to be fair though,
uh,
it like Georgina Campbell, who's the lead, is
oh,
wonderful.
she's so good. Oh my god, who is she? Where does she come from?
Yeah, she's
Amazing.
British as well.
Oh,
It also has
oh,
Justin Long in a wonderfully against type performance.
so great, so
Uh,
great.
and so aware of what the movie needs from him, and just giving it. Uh, he must have been such a good. It feels like he must have been such a great scene partner for this film because
Yeah.
he's so on board with the type of character that he's playing. And I don't know what else to say, man. I loved every frame of this movie. And whoever's listening who hasn't watched it yet, definitely watch it and definitely don't watch the trailer. And I'm not usually like a good story can't be spoiled, but also you should definitely should watch the trailer for this movie.
What was nice, I really enjoyed this film too. It didn't make my list. It didn't actually surprise me as much as you in the second half, but I did like there was some gear changes in this film that felt way more like a Jordan Peele movie than Nope did, if that makes sense. Like some real creative like gear changes, um, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was great, really
Yeah.
great. And I watched it on a plane. I just when you watch this movie, imagine me watching this on a plane surrounded by people, including like old people and children. Especially when there's one particular scene, I'm like, maybe I should put my hands over the screen. Maybe no
Yeah.
one wants to watch this. But
Yeah.
and Bill, this is a movie that has some very good red herrings in it, and the biggest, I don't know, Bill Skarsgård is a great actor, and he takes a lot of credit in this film for kind of leading you down a path that is, it's part of the gear change shock is because you thought something else was going to happen, and Bill Skarsgård is a big part of that. He's so great in this as well.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
So moving on, let's move on to the next one,
Hmm.
alphabetically,
Okay.
which is the I thought one of the most heartfelt movies of the year, and that is the story of a young Shell trying to find his family in Marcel
Oh my god.
the Shell with Shoes On, which is a movie that made me openly weep the first time that I saw it.
Well, it's a film about how
It's
children deal with death.
Yeah,
That
it's a
is
film about
that is this film.
it's a film about how we process death and grief and loss and friendship, and it's very sweet. Um, Again, like if you haven't seen this movie, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You should watch this movie. It's got a wonderful voice performance from Jenny Slate as this young boy Marcel, who's a small shell with one eye and a backpack, and he goes on an adventure to find his family with the help of the guy who owns the house he happens to live in or is renting the house he lives in. And the whole world is seen through Marcel's eyes, and it is so like naive and innocent, and I'll just say it at times joyous, but there's no guile, there's no sarcasm. It's all utterly sincere, which is a thing I think I've said a couple of times now in this episode. Um, but the way that it approaches, um, again, grief and loss and death is one that if you don't cry, I will question where your heart exists, because
Hmm.
it is a wonderful film in the same way that something like Inside Out is a wonderful film that teaches kids
Hmm.
to process emotion. This is probably, I think you would agree, a little bit more grown up version of that, probably like a young teen versus young child version of that,
Yeah,
um, but like
I have
still
some.
absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it is. I have some issues about how this film was marketed because my son went to see this movie. My son, who is just turned 12, is just about the right age for this film, and he went with a bunch of younger kids, and the younger kids did not handle this film well at all because it is a film about watching a child go through and process death and grief. That is this film, and the child happens to look like a cute shell. It is. It's a devastating movie, but it's very cute. It's brilliantly made, and I think you summarized the key to it is that um, it's not ironic. It's not trying to be ironic. It's really rooted, and everyone's just trying to be nice to the shell,
Mm,
and it's tough. It's really tough watch, and I don't think younger kids should go and watch this film. Or no, actually, let me rephrase that. I think parents should know very exactly what film they're going into. I can imagine them going up and saying, "Okay, what do you want to see? The cute shell, or this fox, or this dog, or like which of these children's films shall we see?" And this is not like another children's film. This is a very specific examination of death and grief, and it's hard to watch.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. But again, I think
It's so good though.
one of the
It's
best
so good.
films of the entire
Yeah.
year.
Oh, easily. It's really good as long as you know what you're going in for.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
So moving on, I think another one I don't think you have seen. But I am a sucker for the subgenre of drama that is good journalists doing good journalism.
Right. Yeah, you do love
And
those, don't you?
yeah, and She Said, which is a dramatization of the journalistic investigation into Harvey Weinstein, is an excellent example of that subgenre. In the same way that Spotlight is, or All the President's Men is, it is unpretentious and workmanlike, just two journalists investigating a claim, investigating a story that they've heard about. Um, I, there's an argument to be made about um, whether the film is maybe held back a little bit by the celebrities who are in the film and who are maybe not in the film. But aside from that, Zoe Kazan and her name Carrie Mulligan
Carey
are
Mulligan's a fantastic actress.
yeah, they are both so good in this movie, and the film does a number of great things. One of which is that their main boss, is played by Patricia Clarkson, and she is um, questioning of their story, but in the way that a good editor should be, which is like, tell me what you're doing, and so that I'm on board, not like you're wrong. You know what I mean? Not pushing back, but like pushing, not trying to nudge into correct ways, and then it just also makes room for these women to do their job. Um, and 99% of the movie is just these women again doing their job, and I really loved every frame of it. It does feel a little close, like it does feel like, the Harvey Weinstein thing is a very recent development. He's in jail now, but he's still pending. He still has cases pending in LA, or California,
Is it,
and
is it actually about Weinstein? Is it like another guy called like Henry Weatherstein in it, or is it actually
no,
named as
It's
Weinstein?
Harvey Weinstein,
Oh, okay.
and it's a really wonderful movie. Uh, I can't believe I honestly can't believe how little impact it made on the year. But I guess in the same
Mhm,
way that like I think that when Spotlight won Best Picture that year, there was some like what type things, but like Spotlight is an excellent movie. It's just also unassuming. It's not like
mhm,
a big creative swing. It's not high
mhm,
concept. It's just good journalists doing good journalism and good actors portraying those journalists, and it
mhm,
just does that. It does a lot of really interesting things in terms of the way it frames the story, but it's not. It's
mhm,
very workmanlike is the word I'm looking for. It's very workmanlike,
mhm,
and She Said is in that same vein. And
mhm.
I adored this movie, and I can't believe more people don't talk about it as one of the best films of the year. I sincerely hope that Zoe Kazan uh, is nominated for awards, and same um, with Carey Mulligan. I don't think they're my favorite two performances of the year, but they deserve all the
Mhm,
recognition in the world for
mhm,
telling the story and
mhm.
telling it in a very professional yet empathetic way. And I look forward
Excellent.
to watching it again.
Hmm,
Yeah.
cool.
So that leaves only one film on my list of
Which I have,
11, which you haven't
which I
seen,
also haven't seen. Which might, yeah.
and that is the semi autobiographical film from the best to ever do it, uh, Steven Spielberg's The Fablemans, which we should honestly like. I wish we had been able to do a whole podcast episode on this movie.
Mhm,
Um, I don't know how many of you are aware that Steven Spielberg's parents got divorced, and that is maybe the most formative divorce in the history of pop culture. It's not a mistake that so many of his films deal with characters who have parents who are going through divorce. Um,
mhm,
or parents who are splitting up, parents who are fighting, or just even just authority figures who are uh, fighting. Right. I think that idea sort of permeates lots and lots and lots of his work, and this is the first time that I'm aware of that he has confronted this part of his life in a direct way. Uh,
Mhm.
and then coupling how that influenced him as a young man and his love and support from his parents, but also them not understanding him, wanting to be a filmmaker. His dad, very famously, was an engineer and didn't really get it. His mom was a performer who did get it, but for other reasons was kind of not necessarily there in the way that he needed her to be. And um, I don't I don't quite know how to get into this film in a more meaningful way in such a short time. But it is very much, I mean, lots of people write off Spielberg because he's so good at what he does. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but
Mhm.
he's a man who, if any other filmmaker had made any of his last several films, we would be heralding those people as like the next big thing. But every time
Yeah.
Spielberg cranks out a masterpiece, we're like, well, that's Spielberg for you, like I just
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
masterpiece from that Steve guy. Um, and this is another one of those films. It's a wonderful coming of age story. It's a, a wonderful look at what it was like to be a young man in the time that he grew up and going through the things that he went through. And it's by far, I think, maybe his most personal film, and it affected me in a way that I wasn't quite prepared for. And I
Oh,
had,
wow.
I had a really hard time choosing a favorite this year. And I think
Mhm.
what this one comes down to for me is just that it was so personal. It is clearly so personal.
Mhm.
Um, and Gabriel Labelle, who I don't honestly remember seeing anything. He was in The Predator, apparently, but I don't remember him being in it. Um, but he's the kid who plays the young Spielberg insert Sammy and the young filmmaker, and he is so wonderful throughout. And you can clearly tell there's so much joy. And one of the things I remember most clearly, I'm sure like you, I watched a ton of special features on DVDs and movies and
Mhm.
when I was a kid, and I have these distinct memories of watching Spielberg talking about when he made Saving Private Ryan, about how when he was a kid, he would make these war movies with his friends, and how he would like create the effects of like bullet shots and all of this other stuff. And then in this movie, we get to see that because Sammy makes war
Mhm.
films with his friends, and it's just a really a wonderful. I keep saying wonderful. I need a thesaurus, but it's such a
Mhm.
wonderful film, and again, such a if you're a fan of Spielberg, especially, and again, I am. I believe him to be the best to ever do it. This movie is a wonderful. I'm stuck on that word. You know when you say a word a lot of times and it starts to lose meaning. There's a word for that too. Um,
It's wonderful when you do that.
yeah, it is. But it's delightful to look back and to go with him to look back at his
Mhm.
childhood, his formative events. And
So
I do like, the more I talk about it, the more I think it is the best film of the year.
see, I agree. I think Spielberg's the best living filmmaker, and the
I
my
don't I don't think
reaction to
I don't think he's the best filmmaker. Best living filmmaker. I think he's the best filmmaker.
oh, interesting. That's really I would have a trouble disagreeing with you, to be honest. I worry any time a filmmaker makes a movie that's like my life in film, it kind of puts my not doesn't make me want to rush out and watch it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That
it's
I
very much
I
not.
don't
It's very much not
I
his life
worry
in a
that it's
film.
like
It's his life, and he's a filmmaker.
right.
It's an important distinction.
Yeah, I look forward to watching it. I think it might disrupt my top 10
Yeah,
because I love good Spielberg is something I really really love and cherish, and I get the feeling this is good Spielberg. So I'll be interested to see when I see it how what goes in my list. But yeah, it's very high on my list of things to see. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. This is another one too where
Okay.
like I spoke before about how the this is a year of like great actress performances, and
Hmm.
I would not be shocked if Michelle Williams took home all the awards for
Right.
playing his mother. I think that interestingly, Paul Dano, who
Hmm.
uh, is actually I think a fairly underrated actor because he often takes sort of weird character roles, and in this
Hmm.
one he's basically a very straightforward dude who's an engineer who has 4 kids and
Hmm.
he's just sort of a great family man, and I think he's also really good in it. There's uh, also a really good Seth Rogen performance in this, in a role that like you think Seth Rogen you would never think of this kind of character,
Yeah.
and he's it's nice to see Seth Rogen trying to do more stuff, just very generally. But then this film also, again, we've talked a lot about moments. I've talked a lot about moments, but Gabriel Labelle gets one of the most satisfying moments where he stands up to his bully towards the end of this
Hmm.
film, and he also gets a great moment. There's an inspired piece of casting towards the at the very end of the film where Sammy, the Spielberg insert, meets his hero, who's John Ford, and they
Hmm.
cast David Lynch to be Ford, and it
That's
is
John Ford.
and it is one. I won't. I'm not going to repeat it here because you should just watch the movie. But it is.
Yeah.
He gets one of the most memorable scenes of the entire year. Is just like a 2 line, like one. Basically, it's one line. It's one exchange, and it's like 4 lines between Sammy and John Ford,
Hmm.
and and then there's like a camera movement, and it is just such a perfect end to the film, and
Hmm.
like interestingly such a perfect sum up to Spielberg's sensibilities, and I
Hmm.
legitimately cannot wait to watch this movie
Wow.
again.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, before that sounds great. I want to. I know we're running on to 2 hours now, so we have to finish soon. But I just want to mention two films that weren't on my list. They're not on your list, and I was surprised that they didn't feature in your best of the rest. And that's After Yang,
After
which I
Yang's
really liked,
After Yang's on my best of
and
the rest.
oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, and Tar as well, which I disliked, but
Also
I know you like that movie.
also in my best of the rest. Pretty much on the
Okay,
strength of Kate Blanchett's performance.
okay, fine.
Uh,
I didn't realize it was on your best of the rest.
yeah, along with, I mean, there's we're talking about honorable mentions. I'm not going to go into any detail, but like the outfit was great this year.
Oh, that
If
was
you want to see
yeah.
a
I enjoyed
lovely
that.
documentary, Fire of Love, I believe, is on Disney Plus everywhere now.
Yes, I've heard great things about that.
There's a great Canadian film that I think actually, like I said, Polaris is probably my favorite Canadian film, but there's a great Canadian film who, if you were a film nerd in the 90s, a teenage film nerd in the 90s, you should definitely seek out the film I Like Movies, which is about a film nerd working in a video store
Hmm.
in Ontario in the 90s. Super great.
Hmm.
If you like horror, like Pearl, I did not like X. I am shocked at how much I liked Pearl, and Mia Goth is wonderful in it. And the end credits are one of the most interesting and unsettling things I've seen in a long time. And it's just a wordless look at the camera.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's. I mean, I know you didn't really dig it,
Cool.
but I also we rewatched Nope recently, and that is still I think one of the best movies of the year, even though it didn't make my list. Like if my
Mm.
list was a top 20, it would be on there for sure.
Uh, I
So
didn't do anything for me.
yeah, I know you're
Well,
allowed to be wrong.
it was. Um, oh, I forget. So I've talked about my resolution as watching more international films. Have you got a film resolution this year? I know you've
Um,
talked about watching more Canadian content.
yeah, I have a couple of goals. I'm not going to go so far as to call them resolutions, but as part of my Christmas this year, I have decided to get more back into physical media. So I am going to try and seek out some Criterion stuff as my
Hmm.
physical media acquisition goal. The day before Christmas, I owned no blue. Well, I owned the Criterion Godzilla box set, and that was the only thing I owned. That and the Star Trek 55th anniversary, and then the classic Movie Monsters box set you got me were the only 3 things that I still
Hmm.
owned. And now I have like half a dozen Criterion movies, so I'm working my way through those, and it's a dangerous and expensive hobby.
Do you know what
Um,
so I was looking when you mentioned Criterion. I was looking on Amazon to see what they had, and they have the worst person in the world Criterion release on their
yeah, they do.
Blu-ray, which I think that might be something I buy quite soon.
Yep. I'm also like I'm trying to seek out more Indian cinema. I have watched a couple of things. I've watched Bahubali
Hmm.
and I've watched Brahmastra Part One, Shiva, recently, which is
I love your dramatic voice.
I mean, there's all
Brahmastra.
these movies are cranked to 11 in a way that I'm really enjoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I just this year I would very much like to make because I've done a pretty good job of it in the past, but I don't think I did a very good job of seeking out Canadian cinema this year. So I'd like to
Hmm.
rectify that in 2023.
Fair enough. All very great ideas.
Yeah, but I think that
Well,
is,
so that wraps us up, really, doesn't it? Getting on to 2 hours.
yeah, this is way longer than we would normally do. So everyone who's still here listening, thank you so much for listening, and welcome to 2023. This is
Yeah,
twice
it's a
as
good way
long
to
as
start.
we normally go. So just be aware of that. We would love to thank you all for listening. If you're new here, amazing. If you're not new here, also amazing. We love all of you. If you'd like to support us more, we give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice, or throw us a few bucks on Patreon. We have that all linked in the show notes. What else? What am I forgetting? Simon, where can people find you on the social medias?
I mean, until Twitter explodes, I'm on there as temporary pen, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
I'm not really else.
Twitter's our main outlet, so you can find us at Awesome Friday CA and me at Matthew AF. And you can also send us an email, comments at awesomefriday.ca, or just go to the website and interact with us there. We film this here in Vancouver on film. We record this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. And thank you for joining us on this awesome Friday.
Thank you. See you soon.